I stood at the entrance of my own son's wedding, the one I'd scraped and saved for months just to attend, and watched the security guard shake his head. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to leave." Behind him, through the glass doors, I could see crystal chandeliers, white roses, champagne towers. My son Ryan's wedding. My only child and his new wife Vanessa, already in her $20,000 gown, staring straight at me with a smile that could freeze hell itself. She mouthed 2 words: "Not today." That's when I knew I wasn't just uninvited, I was erased. If you want to see how far a mother's love can bend before it finally breaks, stay with me until the end. And please, hit that like button and comment what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. I need you to understand something right from the start. I'm not the kind of woman who makes scenes. I've spent 69 years on this earth keeping my head down, my voice soft, my expectations reasonable. When my husband Tom died 4 years ago, I didn't fall apart in public. I cried in the shower where nobody could hear me. When the bills piled up and I had to sell our house and move into that cramped 1-bedroom apartment above the dry cleaners, I didn't complain. I just packed up 37 years of memories into boxes and called it downsizing. So when I say that standing outside my son's wedding, being told I wasn't welcome, broke something fundamental inside me, I need you to believe that I'm not exaggerating. Let me back up. 6 months earlier, Ryan had called me on a Tuesday evening. I remember because Tuesdays I usually had leftover meatloaf, and I was just putting a slice in the microwave when my phone rang. "Mom?" His voice had that tight, busy quality it always had these days, like he was squeezing me in between conference calls. "Ryan, honey, how are you? I haven't heard from you and..." "I'm good, Mom. Listen, I've got news." He paused, and I could hear a woman's voice in the background, smooth and insistent. "I'm getting married." I'd nearly dropped the phone. "Married? Ryan, that's wonderful. I didn't even know you were seeing anyone seriously." Her name's Vanessa. Vanessa Hartwick. We met at a corporate retreat 8 months ago. 8 months. My son had been in a relationship for 8 months, serious enough to propose, and this was the first I was hearing of it. The wedding's in June 15th. Oh, I'd pulled out my little calendar, the free one from the pharmacy, June 15th. I'd already marked it. That was the week I was supposed to help Mrs. Chen from downstairs with her citizenship test. But of course I'd reschedule. "I'll be there, sweetheart. I wouldn't miss it for the world." Another pause. That woman's voice again, sharper this time. "Yeah, about that, Mom. It's going to be a pretty upscale event. Vanessa's family is, well, they're prominent. Her father owns Hartwick Industries. So it's going to be at the Plaza Royale, black tie, the whole thing." I'd looked down at my threadbare cardigan, the one with the pulled threads I kept meaning to fix. "That's fine, honey. I'll find something appropriate to wear." "Great, good. I'll have someone send you the details." Someone. Not him. Someone. The details arrived via email. I'd had to go to the library to print them out because I didn't own a printer anymore. Formal invitation on cream-colored cardstock, so thick it barely fit through the machine. "Mr. and Mrs. Gregory Hartwick request the honor of your presence at the marriage of their daughter Vanessa Marie to Ryan Thomas Carter." Not even son of Evelyn Carter, like I'd been photoshopped out of his history. But I told myself I was being sensitive, reading into things. I started saving immediately. My Social Security check was $1,247 a month. Rent was $750. That left $497 for everything else: food, utilities, medication for my blood pressure, the occasional bus fare. I started cutting corners, generic brands instead of name brands. Turned the heat down to 60 degrees even though my joints ached in the cold. Skipped my blood pressure medication every other day to make it last longer. By June, I had $340 saved, enough for a dress. I found it at a consignment shop 2 bus rides away. A navy blue dress with 3/4 sleeves and a modest neckline. It had a small stain near the hem, but the woman at the shop showed me how to position myself so it wouldn't show. With alterations, it cost $187. I spent another $45 on shoes. Clearance rack. Half a size too small, but I could manage. I'd stuffed tissue in the toes. The remaining money went to a gift. I couldn't afford anything on their registry. The cheapest item was a $300 salad bowl, so I made something instead. I took Tom's old watch, the one his father had given him, and had it engraved. To Ryan and Vanessa, may your time together be precious. Love, Mom. It cost $98 to engrave and polish. When I picked it up, the jeweler had looked at the watch, then at me, and I saw pity flash across her face. I pretended not to notice. The morning of June 15th, I woke up at 5 a.m., even though the wedding wasn't until 4 p.m. Couldn't sleep. I spent an hour in the bath using a sliver of the good soap I'd been saving. Did my hair with hot rollers I'd borrowed from Mrs. Chen. Put on the dress, the shoes, looked at myself in the mirror. I looked like someone's grandmother trying very hard to look like she belonged at a society wedding. But I smiled anyway, because I was going to see my son get married. That was all that mattered. The bus ride to the Plaza Royale took 90 minutes and 2 transfers. By the time I arrived, my feet were already hurting from the 2 small shoes. The hotel was enormous, glass and marble and doormen in uniforms that probably cost more than my monthly rent. I walked up slowly, carefully, holding the small gift bag with Tom's watch inside. That's when I saw her. Vanessa was standing just inside the entrance, talking to a man with a clipboard. I'd only seen her in photos Ryan had texted me. Professional headshots mostly, or pictures from charity galas, where she wore gowns that cost more than cars. In person, she was striking. Tall, blonde, the kind of thin that comes from having a personal trainer and a private chef. Her wedding dress, even though the ceremony was still hours away, was already on, and it was breathtaking. Layers of silk and lace. A train that must have been 10 feet long, diamonds catching the light every time she moved. She saw me approaching and her smile dropped like a mask being pulled off. "Oh," she said. Just that. Oh, like I was a problem she hadn't expected to encounter. "Hello," I said, walking forward with my hand extended. "You must be Vanessa. I'm Evelyn, Ryan's mother. I'm so happy to finally meet you." She didn't take my hand. Instead, she turned to the man with the clipboard, security I realized, seeing the earpiece, and said, "Can you handle this?" Handle this. Like I was a package, a situation. The security guard stepped forward and his face was professionally blank. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to leave." I actually laughed. It was so absurd. "Leave? I'm the groom's mother. Ryan is my son." "I understand, Mom, but there's been a mistake." I looked past him to Vanessa, who was now examining her nails. "Vanessa, honey, maybe we got our signals crossed. I know I didn't RSVP. The card got lost in the mail, but I called Ryan last week and told him I was coming." "Did you?" Vanessa's voice was flat, bored. She looked up at me then, and her eyes were the coldest things I'd ever seen, like looking into a frozen lake. "Mrs. Carter, let me be very clear. This is a carefully curated event. Every guest has been selected to reflect a certain aesthetic, a certain standard." Her gaze traveled down my body, lingering on my discount rack shoes, my consignment store dress. "You don't meet that standard." The words hit me like a slap. I'm his mother, and I'm his future. Which do you think matters more to Ryan's career? To his position at my father's company? She stepped closer, and I could smell her perfume, something expensive and sharp. "He didn't tell you not to come because he's weak. He still has some misguided sentimentality about you, but I'm not weak, and I'm not sentimental. You being here in that dress with that... Look," she gestured vaguely at me. "It would raise questions. It would make people wonder, and we can't have that." "What kind of questions?" My voice sounded small, distant. Whether Ryan really belongs in our world, whether he's actually one of us, or if he's just playing dress-up. She smiled then, and it was worse than her coldness. "You're a reminder of where he came from, and where he came from is not where he's going." The security guard touched my elbow. "Ma'am, please." I pulled away from him. "I need to see Ryan." I need to hear this from him. He's getting ready, he's busy. Then I'll wait. Vanessa sighed like I was a child throwing a tantrum. She pulled out her phone, typed something, waited. 30 seconds later, my own phone buzzed in my purse. A text from Ryan. Mom, Vanessa told me you came by. I think it's better if you head home. This is really stressful for me and I can't deal with drama right now. I'll call you after the honeymoon. Love you. I stared at the screen until the words blurred. He'll call you after the honeymoon, Vanessa repeated, like she'd been reading over my shoulder. Isn't that nice? Now, leave before I have you escorted out in a way that's less dignified. I should have fought. I should have screamed, demanded to see my son, made the scene Vanessa was so afraid of, but I didn't, because I was raised to believe that making a scene was the worst thing a woman could do, worse than being humiliated, worse than being erased. So I left. I walked out of the Plaza Royale with as much dignity as I could gather, which wasn't much. My hands were shaking so badly I dropped the gift bag twice before I made it to the street. The doorman, a young kid, maybe 20, started to ask if I needed a cab, then saw my face and went quiet. I walked, didn't even think about which direction. My feet hurt, my heart hurt worse, and I just walked. I don't know how long I wandered. Long enough for the sun to shift position in the sky, long enough for blisters to form on my heels where the two small shoes rubbed. I found myself in a part of the city I didn't recognize, older buildings, tree-lined streets, quieter than downtown. That's when I heard it. Help. Please. Someone. The voice was thin, reedy, coming from up ahead. I looked up and saw an elderly woman in a wheelchair at the bottom of a steep hill. She was trying to push herself up the incline, but the wheels kept slipping backward. I should have kept walking. I was already destroyed. I had nothing left to give. But Tom's voice echoed in my head, something he used to say. The worst thing that can happen to a person isn't losing everything. It's losing everything and then using that as an excuse to stop being decent. I walked over to the woman. Up close, she was probably in her 80s, thin as a bird, with white hair and hands that trembled with effort on the wheelchair rims. Can I help you? I asked. She looked up at me and her eyes were wet. I need to get to the cemetery. Up there. She pointed to the top of the hill where I could see iron gates and headstones beyond. It's my husband's birthday. I come every year, but the path they usually use is under construction, and I can't get up this hill. Let me, I said. I moved behind her wheelchair, gripped the handles. They were cold metal under my palms. Bless you, she whispered. Bless you, dear. I started pushing. The hill was steeper than it looked, and my arms burned almost immediately. The woman was light, but the incline was brutal, and my feet screamed in the two small shoes. Halfway up, I had to stop and catch my breath. I'm sorry, I panted. Just give me a second. Take your time, she said. What's your name, dear? Evelyn. I'm Margaret Langford. We made it up the hill in increments. Push, rest, push, rest. By the time we reached the cemetery gates, my dress had dark patches of sweat under the arms, and my hair had come loose from its careful styling. I looked like exactly what Vanessa had feared I would look like at her wedding. Poor, tired, out of place. But Margaret was smiling. Thank you, she said, gripping my hand. You have no idea what this means to me, what today means. I understand, I said, and I did, because I knew what it was like to love someone so much that you'd climb a hill on their birthday just to sit with their memory. Do you have time? Margaret asked suddenly. To sit with me for a bit? I don't like being alone here. I looked at my phone. 3:47 p.m. The wedding ceremony would be starting in 13 minutes without me. Yes, I said, I have time. We sat together on a bench near her husband's grave. Robert Langford, the headstone read, Beloved husband and father, 1935 to 2019. Margaret told me about him, how they'd met at a church social in 1957, how he'd proposed with a ring he'd saved 8 months to buy, how they'd built a business together from nothing, raised 2 sons, survived cancer and bankruptcy and all the small disasters that make up a long marriage. And your sons, I asked, do they visit? Her smile faded. One does sometimes, Daniel, but he's very busy, very successful. He runs the company now. It's much bigger than when Robert and I had it, worth billions. She said it without pride, just fact. My other son, we don't speak. He wanted me to sell the family home and move into a facility, said it would be easier. I think what he meant was easier for him. I'm sorry, I said. Are you married, dear? Widowed, 4 years now. Children? I hesitated. A son, Ryan. Today was his wedding, actually. Oh, and you're here instead. What happened? The whole story came pouring out. I don't know why. Maybe because Margaret was a stranger, or because I'd been holding it in for so long, or because sitting in a cemetery with someone else's grief made my own feel less pathetic. I told her everything. The phone call, the saving, the dress, Vanessa's cold eyes, Ryan's text message. When I finished, Margaret was quiet for a long moment. My son, the one I don't speak to, he married a woman like that, she finally said. Beautiful, ambitious, completely ruthless. She convinced him I was an embarrassment, that I didn't fit their lifestyle. He didn't fight for me, just like your Ryan didn't fight for you. Maybe I should have tried harder, I said. Maybe if I'd been different, better. Stop. Margaret's voice was sharp, and I looked at her in surprise. Don't you dare make yourself smaller to fit into someone else's cruelty. Your son made a choice, a cowardly, selfish choice, and that's on him, not you. Tears started then, hot and fast and ugly. I cried in that cemetery the way I hadn't let myself cry anywhere else. Margaret held my hand and didn't say anything, just let me fall apart. When I finally stopped, she said, "What are you going to do now?" "I don't know," I admitted. "Go home, I guess. Wait for him to call after the honeymoon. Try to, I don't know, fix whatever I broke." "You didn't break anything," Margaret said firmly. "But I understand the instinct. We're trained to think our children's rejection is somehow our fault. That if we just loved them better, harder, more quietly, they'd love us back." She squeezed my hand. "Sometimes they don't deserve what we give them, and we have to love them anyway, but we don't have to destroy ourselves in the process." We sat there until the sun started to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, beautiful and completely indifferent to the small human heartbreaks happening below it. "I should get you back down the hill," I said finally. "Actually, dear, my driver should be here soon, but would you do me one more favor?" Margaret pulled a card from her purse and pressed it into my hand. "If you ever need anything, and I mean anything, you call that number, promise me." I looked at the card. Heavy cream cardstock, embossed lettering, Margaret Langford, and a phone number. No title, no company name. "I promise," I said, though I knew I'd never use it. People like Margaret with drivers and private cemeteries didn't really mean it when they said things like that. I pushed her wheelchair back to the cemetery entrance where a black town car was indeed waiting. The driver, a kind-faced man in his 50s, helped Margaret into the back seat with the practiced ease of someone who'd done it 1,000 times. "Evelyn!" Margaret called out the window as the car started to pull away. "You're stronger than you think you are. Don't forget that." I waved until the car disappeared around a corner. Then I was alone again. I checked my phone. 6:23 p.m. The ceremony would be over by now. They'd be at the reception, all those carefully curated guests, drinking champagne that cost more per bottle than my monthly grocery budget, celebrating a love story that had no room for the woman who'd given the groom life. And I realized something standing there on that quiet street, my feet bleeding in my 2 small shoes, my discount dress rumpled and stained. I was done being quiet. I was done making myself small. I was done accepting that my only value was in how little space I took up. The reception was at the same venue, just in a different ballroom. I knew this because I'd memorized every detail of that cream-colored invitation, reading it over and over like it was a love letter instead of a formal announcement. I got on a bus heading back downtown. The driver looked at me twice, probably because I looked like I'd been hit by a truck, but didn't say anything. I found a seat in the back and stared out the window at the city sliding past. I was going to that reception. I was going to see my son, and if Vanessa wanted a scene, I'd give her one. The Plaza Royale was lit up like a palace when I arrived, just after 7 p.m. I could hear music floating out through the open terrace doors, a live band playing something slow and romantic. Through the windows, I could see people dancing, laughing, champagne glasses catching the light from massive crystal chandeliers. I walked straight to the entrance. Different security guard this time, a woman with sharp eyes and an earpiece. She held up a hand as I approached. Invasion? I don't have one. Then I can't let you in, ma'am. I'm the groom's mother. Her expression didn't change. I'm going to need you to step aside, ma'am. No. The word came out stronger than I expected. No, I'm not stepping aside. My son is in there, and I have every right. You have the right to leave before I call the police. Call them. I was surprised by my own voice, by how steady it was. Call them and explain that you're keeping a mother out of her son's wedding. I'd love to see how that plays in the press, especially when the groom works for his father-in-law's company. I wonder what Heartbroken Industries' PR team would think about that story. The guard hesitated, touching her earpiece, listening to someone on the other end. Then she stepped aside. You have 5 minutes, she said, and if you cause any disruption, I will have you removed, forcibly if necessary. I walked past her into the most beautiful room I'd ever seen. The ballroom was enormous, easily 200 people, maybe more, ice sculptures at every table, flower arrangements that must have cost thousands. A dance floor where couples swayed to the band's music, and at the center of it all, on a raised platform with a cake that looked like it belonged in a museum, stood Ryan and Vanessa. My son looked happy. That's what hurt the most. He was laughing at something Vanessa was saying, his arm around her waist, completely at ease in this world of wealth and excess. He looked like he'd been born to it, like he'd never had a mother who clipped coupons and saved aluminum cans for the 5-cent deposit. I started walking toward him, weaving between tables. People were staring now. I could feel their eyes on me, could hear the whispered questions. Who is that? Why is she dressed like that? Is she lost? I was 20 feet away when Vanessa saw me. Her face transformed from glowing bride to something reptilian. She leaned close to Ryan and whispered something, and his head snapped up, his eyes finding mine. For just a second, one brief, beautiful second, I saw my little boy in his face. The Ryan who used to make me Mother's Day cards with crayons and construction paper, who used to call me when he was homesick at college, who used to tell me I was his favorite person in the world. Then Vanessa's hand tightened on his arm, and that Ryan disappeared. Mom, he said, stepping down from the platform. His voice was tight, embarrassed. What are you doing here? I came to see you get married. My voice shook, but I kept going. I'm your mother, Ryan. I raised you by myself after your father died. I worked 2 jobs to pay for your school. Not here, he hissed, grabbing my elbow and steering me toward a side door. Jesus Christ, not here. We ended up in a service hallway, surrounded by stacked chairs and catering equipment. The beautiful music was muffled now, distant. You can't just show up like this, Ryan said. He was angry, actually angry at me. Vanessa told you not to come. I told you not to come. You sent me a text message, I said. A text message, Ryan, telling me to miss my only child's wedding. Because I knew this would happen. I knew you'd make it about you. Make it about me? The laugh that came out of me was borderline hysterical. Ryan, I spent 6 months saving money I didn't have to buy a dress and a gift, so I could watch you get married. I took 3 buses to get here. I have blisters on my feet that are bleeding through my shoes. How exactly is this about me? You don't understand the pressure I'm under. He ran his hands through his hair, messing up whatever product they'd used to style it. Vanessa's father gave me a VP position at his company. Do you know what that means for my career, for my future? And where do I fit into that future? The silence was answer enough. Ryan. I reached for his hand, but he pulled away. Baby, please, I'm not asking you to choose between us. I'm just asking you to make a little room for me. "There is no room," he exploded. "There's no room for someone who shops at thrift stores and lives above a dry cleaner. Do you know what Vanessa's friends would think if they knew my mother was what? Poor, working class?" My voice was quiet now, dangerous. "Say it, Ryan. Say what I am that's so embarrassing to you." He couldn't, or wouldn't. Instead, he said, "After the honeymoon, we'll figure something out. Maybe you could move somewhere else, somewhere nicer. I could help with that financially. You want to pay me to disappear. I want to help you have a better life, without you in it." He flinched like I'd hit him. Good, he should flinch. The door behind us burst open and Vanessa stood there, backlit by chandelier light, looking like an avenging angel in white silk. "5 minutes," she said coldly. "I gave you 5 minutes to have this conversation privately, out of respect for Ryan. Time's up." "Vanessa, give us a second," Ryan started, but she cut him off. "No, no more seconds, no more patience, no more accommodating your guilt over the woman who clearly can't take a hint." She turned those frozen lake eyes on me. "You need to leave now, before I have security drag you out in front of everyone." "You can't speak to my mother like that," Ryan said, but his voice was weak, uncertain. "I can speak to her however I want, because unlike you, I'm not conflicted about what she is." Vanessa stepped closer to me, and I could smell champagne on her breath. "You're a leech, a parasite. You spent your whole life making Ryan feel guilty for wanting more than your pathetic little life could offer him. And now you're here, trying to ruin the best day of his life because you can't stand to see him happy without you." "That's not," I started, but she talked over me. "How much?" Vanessa pulled out her phone. "How much to make you go away and stay away? 10,000, 20? Name your price. Everyone has one." The room spun. This wasn't happening. This couldn't be happening. I looked at Ryan, my son, my baby, the boy I'd rocked to sleep every night after Tom died, the teenager I'd tutored through algebra because we couldn't afford a tutor, the young man I'd helped move into his first apartment, driving a U-Haul across 3 states because he'd gotten his dream job. "Ryan," I whispered, "tell her she's wrong. Tell her I'm not. Tell her you don't think that about me." He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again, and said nothing. That silence was louder than any words could have been. "Get out," Vanessa said softly, "before I make this worse for you than it already is." I walked out of that ballroom with whatever shreds of dignity I had left. People parted in front of me like I was contagious. I heard the whispers, saw the phones coming out to record my humiliation. Somewhere, someone was probably already posting about this on social media. Crazy woman crashes society wedding. The security guard at the door didn't even look at me as I passed. I made it outside before I started sobbing. Huge, gasping sobs that felt like they were tearing me apart from the inside. I collapsed onto a bench near the valet stand, and the valets pretended not to see me, trained to ignore uncomfortable scenes. I don't know how long I sat there, long enough for my sobs to slow to hiccups, long enough for the sun to fully set and the city lights to come on, long enough to feel the full weight of what had just happened settle onto my shoulders like a physical thing. I'd lost my son, not to death, that I could have survived. I'd survived Tom dying. I'd survived poverty and loneliness and 1,000 small indignities. But this? Losing Ryan to his own shame of me, to his ambition and his new wife's cruelty. I didn't know how to survive that. I was reaching for my phone to call someone, anyone, I didn't even know who, when I heard it. The sound of helicopter blades cutting through the air. I looked up confused as a sleek black helicopter descended toward the building's rooftop helipad. It was unusual. Wealthy people flew into the city all the time, but not usually during private events. Security would have cleared the airspace unless someone important enough had requested access. The helicopter landed. I watched, numb and detached, as a figure emerged. A man in an expensive suit, flanked by 2 other men who had that unmistakable security look about them. And then, impossibly, I saw Margaret Langford, the woman from the cemetery, being helped out of the helicopter by one of the security guards. She was moving slowly, using a cane, but her face was set with determination. She saw me sitting on that bench, and her expression shifted, surprise, then recognition, then something that looked like steel-hard resolve. "Mrs. Carter," she called out. "Evelyn, what are you doing out here?" I couldn't even form words, just gestured helplessly at the building behind me. The man in the suit, tall, maybe mid-40s, with Margaret's same sharp eyes, walked over. "Mother, who is this?" "This is the woman I told you about, Daniel. The one who helped me today." Margaret looked at me, and I saw my own pain reflected in her face. "What happened, dear? Why aren't you inside?" And somehow, impossibly, I told them. The words came out in a rush, tumbling over each other like I was confessing to a crime. I told Margaret and her son everything, the second humiliation, Vanessa's offer to pay me off, Ryan's silence when I begged him to defend me. By the time I finished, my voice was hoarse and my hands were shaking. Daniel Langford listened without interrupting, his jaw tightening with each detail. When I got to the part about Vanessa asking my price, his expression turned to stone. "Mother," he said quietly, "is this the wedding you were invited to tonight?" Margaret nodded. "Gregory Hartwick's daughter. I've known the family for years. Gregory and I serve on several charity boards together." She looked at me with something like fury in her gentle eyes. I had no idea his daughter was capable of this. "She's capable of worse," I said bitterly, "and my son is letting her." Daniel pulled out his phone, typed something quickly. "The Hartwick wedding, Plaza Royale, Venetian ballroom." He looked up at his mother. "You're still planning to make an appearance?" "I am now," Margaret said, and her voice had an edge I hadn't heard before, sharp as a knife. "Evelyn, dear, would you come inside with us as my guest?" I stared at her. "I can't. They'll just throw me out again. I can't take another." "They won't throw you out if you're with me." Margaret squeezed my hand. "Trust me, dear, please, let me do this for you. You helped me when I needed it. Let me return the favor." I should have said no, should have gone home, licked my wounds in private, started the long process of accepting that my son was lost to me. But something in Margaret's face, that steel determination mixed with genuine compassion, made me nod. "Okay," I whispered. Daniel offered his mother his arm, and one of the security guards offered me his. I took it because my legs felt like water, and together we walked back towards the entrance I'd been expelled from twice already. The same female security guard was there. Her eyes widened when she saw our group approaching. "Mrs. Langford," she said, immediately straightening. "We weren't expecting you until later." "Plans changed," Margaret said crisply. "I'm here now, with my guests." The guard's eyes slid to me, recognition dawning. "Ma'am, this woman was already removed from the premises twice. I can't." "You can and you will." Daniel's voice wasn't loud, but it carried absolute authority. "Mrs. Carter is here at my mother's personal invitation. If you have a problem with that, feel free to call Gregory Hartwick directly and explain why you're denying entry to his largest donor and board chair." The guard's face went pale. She stepped aside without another word. We walked into that ballroom for the third time, and it was like entering a different reality. Before, I'd been invisible, an embarrassment, something to be removed. Now, with Margaret on one side and Daniel on the other, people noticed. Heads turned. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. I saw Gregory Hartwick himself, a silver-haired man in an immaculate tuxedo, freeze with a champagne glass halfway to his lips. "Margaret," he called out, moving toward us with the smooth confidence of someone used to commanding rooms. "What a wonderful surprise. I didn't think you were coming until the toasts." He stopped, his eyes landing on me. Confusion flickered across his face. "I'm sorry, have we met?" "This is Evelyn Carter," Margaret said clearly, loud enough that nearby conversations died completely. "The groom's mother." Gregory's confusion deepened. "Ryan's mother, but I was told..." He looked around, searching for someone. His eyes found Vanessa across the room, and something passed between them. Understanding, maybe, or warning. Vanessa started walking toward us, and I felt my stomach clench. She looked like a tiger who'd spotted prey, beautiful and deadly in her wedding dress. "Mrs. Langford," Vanessa said, her voice dripping honey. "How lovely of you to come. I apologize for the confusion. There seems to be a misunderstanding. This woman isn't actually supposed to be here." "Oh?" Margaret's eyebrows rose. "And why is that?" "She wasn't invited," Vanessa said simply. "It's a private event, and we have a strict guest list." "How strange," Daniel said, his voice deceptively mild. "I was under the impression that the groom's mother would be at the top of any wedding guest list, unless there's some new etiquette rule I'm not aware of." A few people nearby laughed nervously. Vanessa's smile tightened. "It's complicated," she said. "Family dynamics can be delicate. I'm sure you understand, Mr. Langford." "I understand perfectly," Daniel replied. "I understand that you deliberately excluded and humiliated a 69-year-old woman whose only crime was wanting to see her son get married. I understand that when she showed up anyway, you offered her money to leave. I understand that you've spent this entire evening treating her like garbage while celebrating your own happiness." He paused, and the silence in the ballroom was absolute. "What I don't understand is how someone raised by Gregory and Patricia Hartwick could behave with so little grace or basic human decency." Vanessa's face flushed red. "You don't know what you're talking about." "Actually, I do, because Mrs. Carter was kind enough to share the details with my mother and me just now. All of them, including the part where she pushed my mother's wheelchair up a hill this afternoon instead of attending your ceremony, because she's the kind of person who helps strangers even when her own heart is breaking." I saw Ryan then, pushing through the crowd. His face was pale, his eyes darting between me and Daniel and his new wife. "What's going on?" "Your mother is here," Daniel said, "as she should have been from the beginning." Ryan's mouth opened and closed. He looked at Vanessa, who shook her head sharply, a clear command. "Don't you dare." "Ryan," I said quietly. Just his name. But in it was every bedtime story I'd read him, every scraped knee I'd bandaged, every parent-teacher conference I'd attended alone, every sacrifice I'd made without asking for gratitude or recognition. For a moment, one brief, fragile moment, I thought he might choose me. Then Vanessa's hand closed around his arm and his face hardened. "Mom, you need to go," he said. "This isn't the time or place." "When is the time?" I asked. "When is the place? After the honeymoon? After you've successfully erased me from your life story? When?" "That's not fair." "Fair?" The word came out louder than I intended, and I didn't care. I was done being quiet. "You want to talk to me about fair? I worked doubles at the diner for 3 years to pay for your college after your father died. I ate ramen for dinner so you could have new shoes. I gave up my entire life to make sure you had opportunities I never did. And you're marrying a woman who thinks I'm too embarrassing to exist in the same room as her champagne fountain." "Mrs. Carter," Gregory Hartwick interjected, and his voice had an edge now. "I understand you're upset, but this is neither the time nor the place for a family therapy session. Perhaps we should all take a breath." "Don't patronize her." Margaret's voice cut through like a whip. "Gregory, I've known you for 15 years. I've watched you build an empire on the foundation of family values and ethical business practices. Is this what those values look like? Allowing your daughter to treat someone's mother like hired help that didn't meet standards?" Gregory's face darkened. "Margaret, with all due respect, this is a family matter." "You made it a public matter when you allowed it to happen at a public event," Daniel said. "And since we're here, let's talk about family values. Mrs. Carter, did you bring a gift for the happy couple?" I'd forgotten about Tom's watch, still in the small gift bag I'd been clutching since this afternoon. I pulled it out with shaking hands. "My husband's watch," I said, "from his father. I had it engraved for Ryan and Vanessa." Daniel took it carefully, examined the inscription. His jaw tightened. "To Ryan and Vanessa, may your time together be precious. Love, Mom." He looked up at Ryan. "When did your father die?" Ryan's voice was barely audible. "When I was 16. And this was his watch, a family heirloom. Worth what, monetarily? Maybe $200, I said. It's not expensive, but Tom wore it every day. It meant something. And you gave it to a son who texted you not to come to his wedding. Daniel's voice was flat with disgust. Unbelievable. Vanessa's mask finally cracked completely. This is ridiculous. We don't need some stranger lecturing us about family dynamics he knows nothing about. Ryan, tell them why she wasn't invited. All eyes turned to Ryan. My son. My baby boy who I'd rocked through nightmares and cheered at little league games and taught to ride a bike and drove to prom and moved into college dorms and loved with every single cell of my being. Because, Ryan said slowly, and each word felt like a knife. Because Vanessa's right. You don't fit, Mom. You never did. I've spent years trying to build a life that's different from the one I grew up in. Better than the one I grew up in. And every time you're around, you remind everyone where I came from, what I used to be. The ballroom was silent enough to hear a pin drop. What you used to be, I repeated numbly. And what was that, Ryan? Loved, cared for, fed and clothed and raised by a mother who would have died for you. Poor, he said, and the word hung in the air like a curse. I used to be poor, Mom, and I'm not anymore. And I need people to forget that, including you. Something inside me shattered, not broke, shattered, like glass ground into powder, impossible to piece back together. Then I'll make it easy for you, I heard myself say. Consider me forgotten. I turned to leave, but Margaret's hand on my arm stopped me. Wait, she said, then louder to the room. Before anyone goes anywhere, I have something to say. She released my arm and stepped forward, leaning on her cane. I came here tonight to make a donation announcement. Gregory, you've been asking me for months to commit to your new children's education initiative, the one that needs a $10 million founding gift to launch. Gregory's expression shifted to cautious hope. Margaret, we don't need to discuss this now. Oh, I think we do, because I've been on the fence about it, wondering if Heartbroken Industries really represents the values I want my family's foundation to support. She looked directly at Vanessa, and tonight I got my answer. Vanessa's face went white. The foundation will not be making that gift, Margaret continued. Not to an organization led by someone who raises their children to believe that wealth matters more than character. That a person's worth can be measured by their bank account or their address or the designer label on their clothing. Mother, Daniel said warningly, but she shook her head. Let me finish. This afternoon, when my wheelchair got stuck at the bottom of that hill, I was helpless, completely at the mercy of whoever might walk by. Do you know how many people passed me before Evelyn stopped? 12, I counted. 12 people saw an elderly woman struggling and decided their time was more valuable than her need. She looked at me and her eyes were wet, but Evelyn stopped, even though she just had her heart broken, even though her feet were bleeding in shoes that didn't fit, even though every part of her must have wanted to just go home and fall apart in private. She stopped. She helped. She sat with me and listened to my grief about my own terrible son who thinks I'm an embarrassment to his lifestyle. I saw Vanessa and Ryan exchange a look. Panic, maybe, or calculation. Mrs. Langford, Vanessa started, her voice syrupy sweet again. I think there's been a terrible misunderstanding. Ryan's mother is absolutely welcome here. We were just trying to protect her from... Don't. The single word from Daniel carried such contempt that Vanessa actually stepped back. Don't insult all of our intelligence by pretending you weren't deliberately cruel. We all heard what you said, what he said. He gestured at Ryan. You wanted her gone because she embarrassed you, because her poverty made you uncomfortable, because in your world, people are only valuable if they can afford the right costume. That's not true, Ryan said, but his voice cracked. Mom, you know I love you. Do I asked. Because, Ryan, I've spent the last 6 months wondering why you never called, why you never visited, why every conversation we had felt like I was inconveniencing you, and now I know. It wasn't that you were busy, it was that you were ashamed. I'm not. He ran his hands through his hair, destroying the careful styling. It's complicated. It's really not, Margaret said quietly. It's very simple. Your mother raised you alone after your father died. She sacrificed everything to give you opportunities. And when you finally got those opportunities, when you finally climbed into the world you'd been dreaming of, you decided the ladder you'd climbed wasn't fancy enough to keep around. That's not fair, Vanessa interjected. You don't understand the pressure Ryan's under. The expectations in our social circle. People judge you based on everything. Your family, your background, your connections. If we'd let her come dressed like that, if people had seen what, I asked. Seen that Ryan's mother isn't rich, that she shops at consignment stores and lives in a small apartment, that she's just a regular person who worked her whole life and still ended up with almost nothing. My voice rose despite myself. What exactly is so shameful about that, Vanessa? What about my life is so horrifying that it justified what you did to me today? She had no answer, or rather her answer was written all over her face. Everything about my life was shameful to her. Gregory Hartwig cleared his throat. Perhaps we should all step outside and discuss this privately. No, Margaret said firmly. I think it's important that everyone here sees this, because I guarantee Ryan and Vanessa aren't the only people in this room who've sacrificed relationships on the altar of ambition, who've discarded people who loved them because those people didn't fit the image they wanted to project. She looked around the ballroom, meeting eyes. How many of you have parents or siblings or old friends you've erased because they remind you of lives you're trying to forget? The silence was damning. That's what I thought, Margaret said softly. So let this be a lesson, because here's what I learned today. Watching this woman push my wheelchair up a hill while her own son was inside a church promising to love and cherish a woman who despises her. Kindness matters more than status. Compassion matters more than connections. And who you are when no one important is watching, that's who you really are. She turned to me. Evelyn, I'd like to offer you a job. I blinked, certain I'd misheard. What? A job at my foundation. We run programs for elderly people who've been marginalized or forgotten by their families. People who dedicated their lives to raising children, who then decided those lives weren't good enough. Her smile was sad. I think you'd be perfect to help run our outreach programs. The pay is $75,000 a year to start, with full benefits and a housing stipend if you need it. The number hit me like a physical blow. $75,000, more than I'd made in my best year at the diner, more than I'd made in some 2-year periods combined. I don't have the right experience, I stammered. I've never worked in non-profit management. You have exactly the right experience, Daniel said. You understand what it feels like to be discarded, to be told you're not good enough, to watch someone you love choose status over love. He glanced at Ryan with barely concealed disgust. That's the expertise we need. Someone who understands the people we're trying to help. Not because they read about them in a case study, but because they've lived it. I looked at Ryan. His face was pale, his eyes wide. I could see the calculations happening behind them. His mother working for the Langford Foundation. The Langfords, who moved in the same circles as the Hartwigs, who had influence and money and power. Mom, he said slowly, that's incredible. Congratulations. He didn't mean it. I could hear the panic underneath the words. Because this changed everything. I wasn't just his embarrassing poor mother anymore. I was his embarrassing poor mother with connections to one of the wealthiest families in the state. Vanessa saw it too. Her eyes narrowed, and I watched her mentally recalibrate, trying to figure out how to spin this new development. Mrs. Carter, she said, and her voice had lost its sharp edge, replaced by something that might have been respect if it wasn't so obviously fake. I owe you an apology. I was stressed about the wedding, and I said things I didn't mean, things that were hurtful and wrong. I hope you can forgive me. No, I said simply. Her perfect smile faltered. I'm sorry. No, I won't forgive you, because you're not actually sorry. You're just scared that I'm not worthless anymore, that I might actually matter to people who matter to you. I took a step closer to her and had the satisfaction of watching her take a step back. Here's what's going to happen, Vanessa. I'm going to take Mrs. Langford's generous job offer. I'm going to work hard and help people who've been thrown away by their families. And every time you see me at a charity event or a fundraiser or anywhere in your precious social circle, you're going to remember that you could have had a relationship with me. You could have welcomed me into your life and your family. Instead, you chose cruelty, and that choice is permanent. I turned to Ryan, and my voice softened despite myself, because he was still my son, even if he'd failed spectacularly at being my son today. Ryan, I love you. I will always love you, but I will never again beg for space in your life. If you want a relationship with me, you're going to have to earn it. You're going to have to prove that you value me as more than an embarrassment you're willing to tolerate when it's convenient. My voice cracked, and until you can do that, I think it's better if we don't talk. Mom, wait. He reached for me, but I stepped back. Don't. Please don't make this harder than it already is. Margaret offered me her arm again. Come on, dear, let's get you out of here. Daniel can handle the rest. As we turned to leave, I heard Gregory Hartwick's voice, sharp with anger. Vanessa Marie Hartwick, my office, Monday morning, 8 a.m. And Vanessa's response, shrill with panic. Daddy, I can explain. But I didn't hear the rest, because we were already walking out, leaving behind the crystal chandeliers and champagne fountains and my son's new life that had no room for the woman who'd given him life in the first place. The helicopter ride to Margaret's estate was surreal. I sat in leather seats softer than my entire couch, looking out at the city lights below, trying to process what had just happened. Everything felt distant, dreamlike, like I'd stepped through a mirror into an alternate reality where my humiliation somehow turned into vindication. Are you really serious about the job? I asked Margaret when we were halfway there. Or were you just trying to make a point? She looked at me and her expression was kind but firm. Evelyn, I never make offers I don't intend to keep. The Langford Foundation needs someone like you, someone who understands what it means to be invisible, to be disposable, to be loved conditionally. She paused. And I think you need us too. Not just for the money, though that certainly doesn't hurt, but because I think you need to remember that your value isn't determined by whether your son appreciates you. Tears started again, hot and fast. I raised him better than this. I know I did. Tom and I, we taught him about kindness and integrity and treating people with respect. How did he turn into someone who could look at me and see nothing but embarrassment? Money changes people, Daniel said from across the cabin. Not everyone, but enough people that it's worth paying attention to. It reveals who they really are underneath the social conditioning. Some people get wealth and use it to lift others up. Others use it to build walls between themselves and anyone who reminds them of their humble origins. Which kind are you? I asked before I could stop myself. He smiled, and it was the first real smile I'd seen from him. I try to be the first kind. Don't always succeed, but I try. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. My mother told me about her other son, the one who wanted to put her in a facility because her health issues were inconvenient for his image. You know what the difference was between him and me? I shook my head. I failed first. I lost everything when I was 28. Bad investments, worse partners, spectacular public humiliation. Had to move back in with my parents and rebuild from nothing. So when I finally made it back, when I finally succeeded, I remembered what it felt like to be the person everyone was embarrassed to know. He glanced at his mother. That's why I won't put her in a facility. Not because I'm a better person than my brother, but because I know what it feels like to be discarded. And I refuse to do that to someone I love. Where is your brother now? I asked. Living in Monaco, we don't speak. Margaret's voice was matter of fact, but I could hear the old pain underneath. He made his choice. I made mine. We both have to live with the consequences. The helicopter landed on a private pad behind a house that made the Plaza Royale look modest, but I was too exhausted to be impressed. Margaret led me inside, through rooms full of art and antiques and the kind of quiet wealth that didn't need to announce itself. You'll stay here tonight, she said, and it wasn't a question. Guest room is ready. Tomorrow we'll figure out the details. Where you'll live, When you can start all of that, but tonight you rest. The guest room was bigger than my entire apartment. The bed was so soft I almost cried when I sat down on it. Someone, one of Margaret's staff I assumed, had already laid out pajamas and toiletries. I changed mechanically, washed my face, brushed my teeth, looked at myself in the mirror. Same woman who'd looked back at me this morning when I'd been so full of hope about seeing my son get married. But different somehow, older, sadder, but also maybe a little bit stronger. My phone buzzed, a text from Ryan. "Mom, please call me, we need to talk about what happened." I stared at the message for a long time. 6 months ago. Hell, 6 hours ago. I would have called immediately, would have apologized for making a scene, for embarrassing him, for existing too loudly in his carefully curated world. But tonight, I turned off my phone and went to bed. I dreamed about Tom. We were in our old house, the one we'd sold after he died, and he was wearing his father's watch, the one I tried to give Ryan. "You did good, Evie," he said in the dream. "You raised our boy right. What he does with that raising, that's on him now, not you." "I miss you," I told him. "I miss you so much it feels like I can't breathe sometimes." "I know, but you're stronger than you think. You always were." He smiled, that crooked smile that had made me fall in love with him 48 years ago. "Don't let Ryan's choices make you doubt your own worth. You're worth more than he can see right now. Maybe someday he'll figure that out. Maybe he won't. Either way, you keep living. You keep being you. Promise me." "I promise," I whispered. When I woke up it was morning and someone was knocking softly on my door. "Mrs. Carter?" A woman's voice, gentle but professional. "I have breakfast for you if you're awake." I sat up, disoriented. The room was flooded with morning light, and for a moment I couldn't remember where I was. Then it all came rushing back, the wedding, the humiliation, Margaret's offer, Ryan's face when he'd called me an embarrassment to his new life. "Come in," I called, my voice rough from crying. A woman in her 50s entered, carrying a tray. She had kind eyes and the comfortable manner of someone who'd worked in the house for years. "Good morning. I'm Patricia, Mrs. Langford's house manager. She asked me to bring you some breakfast and let you know she'd like to see you in the sunroom when you're ready. No rush." The tray held more food than I usually ate in a day. Eggs, toast, fresh fruit, orange juice, coffee that smelled like heaven. "Thank you," I managed. Patricia set the tray on the bedside table and hesitated. "If you don't mind me saying, Mom, what you did yesterday, helping Mrs. Langford, that was a good thing." She hasn't stopped talking about it. After she left, I ate slowly, trying to wrap my mind around the fact that 24 hours ago I'd been scraping together change for bus fare, and now I was eating breakfast in a guest room that probably cost more to furnish than I'd earned in 5 years. I found the sunroom after getting lost twice in the maze of hallways. Margaret was there, reading a newspaper with reading glasses perched on her nose. She looked up when I entered and smiled. "Evelyn, did you sleep?" Eventually. I sat down across from her, suddenly aware of how out of place I looked in borrowed pajamas in this beautiful room. "Margaret, about last night, you don't have to actually give me a job. I understand if you were just trying to make a point to Vanessa and Ryan. Do I strike you as the kind of woman who makes empty gestures?" She set down her newspaper and fixed me with those sharp eyes. "I meant every word. The foundation needs you, and unless I'm very much mistaken, you need a fresh start." "I don't have any qualifications. I was a waitress for 30 years. "You have the only qualification that matters. You understand what it feels like to be invisible." Margaret leaned forward. "Do you know how many people donate to elderly care programs without ever actually meeting the people they're supposedly helping? How many board members see numbers on a spreadsheet instead of human beings with stories and pain and value?" I didn't answer because I didn't trust my voice. "The foundation runs 3 main programs," Margaret continued. "Housing assistance for seniors who've been displaced, job training and placement for people over 60 who need to work but can't find anyone who'll hire them, and family reconciliation services, helping to bridge gaps between elderly parents and the adult children who've drifted away or cut them off entirely." She paused meaningfully. That last one is closest to my heart for obvious reasons. I don't know if I can help with that, I said quietly. I couldn't even keep my own son from cutting me out of his life. That's exactly why you can help, because you understand that sometimes there's nothing you could have done differently. Sometimes people choose status over love, and it's not your fault. She reached across and squeezed my hand. But you also understand that the door doesn't have to stay closed forever, that there might be a path back if both people are willing to walk it. Daniel entered then, dressed for business in a suit that probably cost more than my car used to be worth before I sold it. Mother, Mrs. Carter, good morning. Daniel's going to take you into the foundation office today, Margaret said. Introduce you to the staff, show you around, start the paperwork. Unless you need more time. No, I said quickly, because if I had time to think, I might talk myself out of this, might convince myself that I didn't deserve this opportunity, that I should just go back to my small apartment and my small life and wait for Ryan to decide I was worth his time again. I'd like to start as soon as possible. The Langford Foundation occupied 3 floors of a building in the financial district. As we rode the elevator up, Daniel briefed me on what to expect. The staff is about 40 people total. Most of them are program managers, caseworkers, administrative support. Everyone's dedicated, but we've been having trouble with the family reconciliation program. High turnover, low success rate. People burn out because the work is emotionally exhausting and the outcomes are unpredictable. What's the success rate? I asked. About 30%. We managed to facilitate some kind of meaningful contact in roughly a third of cases. The rest either can't be reached, refuse services, or try and fail to reconnect. He looked at me. It's not an easy program to run. The people who come to us are desperate and heartbroken, and sometimes there's nothing we can do to fix what's been broken. Sounds familiar, I said. The staff meeting was overwhelming. 40 faces, 40 names I'd never remember, 40 people who'd spent years doing non-profit work while I'd been slinging hash and refilling coffee cups. I felt like a fraud standing there while Daniel introduced me as the new director of family services. Mrs. Carter brings a unique perspective to this role, he said, and I wanted to disappear. She understands firsthand the pain of family estrangement, and she's going to help us rethink how we approach reconciliation services. Afterward, a woman about my age approached me. She had steel grey hair and tired eyes. I'm Linda Chen. I've been running family services for the past 2 years. I'm supposed to train you before I transition out. You're leaving? I asked. Burned out, can't take it anymore. She gestured for me to follow her to a small office. Every day I talk to people whose children have abandoned them. Every day I try to help them understand that maybe, just maybe, there's still hope. And every day I watch most of them realize there isn't. She sat down heavily. It destroys you after a while. Over the next week, I shadowed Linda and learned just how destroyed she was. She'd stopped believing any of it mattered. When she talked to clients, her voice was flat, her advice mechanical. She'd given up on actually helping people and was just going through the motions until she could escape. You'll end up the same way, she told me on my 3rd day. You'll hear the same stories over and over. Adult kids who think their parents are too needy, too old-fashioned, too embarrassing. Parents who gave everything and got nothing back. And you'll realize that most of the time, the kids don't actually want reconciliation. They just want their parents to stop bothering them. That's bleak, I said. That's reality. She pulled up a case file on her computer. This woman, Dorothy Simmons, 73. Her daughter hasn't spoken to her in 5 years, won't return calls, won't respond to letters. We reached out on Dorothy's behalf 3 times. The daughter finally sent a cease and desist letter through her lawyer. Why did they stop talking? Linda shrugged. The daughter said her mother was toxic and manipulative. The mother says she just asked too many questions about her daughter's life. Who knows what the truth is? All I know is that Dorothy comes to our support group every week and cries for an hour straight. That night, back at the small apartment the foundation had helped me find, nothing fancy, but clean and affordable and mine. I thought about Dorothy Simmons crying for an hour every week over a daughter who'd hired a lawyer to keep her away. I thought about Ryan, who hadn't called since the wedding, who hadn't responded to the one text I'd sent, saying I was starting my new job and I hoped he was happy. I thought about becoming Linda Chen, burned out and cynical, just collecting a paycheck while people's hearts broke in front of me, and I decided that wasn't going to be me. The next morning I asked Linda for Dorothy Simmons' file. Why? Linda asked. I told you it's hopeless. The daughter won't engage. Then maybe we're approaching it wrong, I said. Can I try? Linda looked at me like I was naive, which I probably was. Knock yourself out, but don't say I didn't warn you. Dorothy Simmons lived in a subsidized senior housing complex on the edge of the city. When I called to ask if I could visit, she sounded surprised. You're the third person from the foundation, she said. The others gave up. I'm not the others, I told her. Her apartment was small and neat, filled with photographs of a little girl at various ages. School pictures, birthday parties, graduation photos. The girl growing into a woman, the photos getting more recent, and then stopping abruptly around age 30. That's Claire, Dorothy said, seeing me look. My daughter, my only child. We sat in her tiny living room and she told me the story, how Claire had been a sensitive child, easily hurt, prone to interpreting everything as criticism, how Dorothy had tried to be supportive but had apparently been too controlling, too involved, too much, how Claire had gone to therapy in her late 20s and come out convinced that her mother was the source of all her problems. She said I was emotionally manipulative, Dorothy said, her voice shaking, that I made her feel guilty for living her own life, and maybe she's right. Maybe I did call too much, ask too many questions, expect too much involvement, but I was just trying to be a good mother. I was just trying to stay connected to my daughter. What was the final straw? I asked. Her wedding, 3 years ago. She told me I could come, but I couldn't bring anyone, not even my sister, who helped me raise Claire after my husband left. She said her wedding was about her new beginning, and she only wanted people there who supported that beginning. Dorothy's hands twisted in her lap. I asked if I could at least give a toast, just a short one, a mother's blessing. She said no, said she didn't want any spotlight taken away from her and her husband. Did you go? Yes, I sat in the back. I didn't talk to anyone. I left right after the ceremony. She looked at me with red-rimmed eyes, and I haven't heard from her since. She blocked my number, returned my letters unopened. When I tried to visit her at work, security escorted me out. The similarities to my own story were painful. Different details, same wound. I understand what you're going through, I said quietly. My son got married last week. His wife told me I wasn't welcome because I'd ruined the aesthetic. My son stood there and let her say it. Dorothy stared at me. You're not just here professionally. No, I'm here because I know what it feels like to love someone who's ashamed of you. We talked for 3 hours. I didn't offer her platitudes or false hope. I just listened, and occasionally I shared my own story. By the time I left, Dorothy was crying again, but differently, not the hopeless tears Linda had described, something that looked almost like relief. Thank you, she said at the door. Thank you for not treating me like a case file. I'm going to reach out to Claire, I told her. I can't promise anything, but I'm going to try a different approach than the foundation has used before. What approach? Honesty, I said. Instead of a formal letter from a non-profit, I'm going to tell her the truth. That I met her mother, that I understand both sides of this, that maybe there's a middle ground between total estrangement and the relationship she's afraid of. That night I drafted a letter to Claire Simmons. It took me 4 hours and a dozen attempts. I finally settled on something short and direct. Dear Claire, my name is Evelyn Carter. I work for the Langford Foundation, but I'm writing to you as someone who understands family complications from both sides. My son recently got married and made it clear that I'm an embarrassment to his new life, so I understand why you might need distance from your mother. I also met your mother this week, and I understand why she can't accept that distance. There might not be a solution that makes everyone happy, but I wonder if there's a solution that makes everyone a little less sad. If you're willing to talk, even just once, my number is below. If not, I respect that too. But I hope you'll consider it. Not for me, not for the foundation, but for the 73-year-old woman who sits in her apartment surrounded by pictures of you and wonders where she went wrong. I sent it certified mail so I'd know if she received it. The waiting was torture. In the meantime, my phone was full of messages from Ryan. Dozens of texts I hadn't opened, voicemails I hadn't listened to. Part of me wanted to delete them all. Part of me wanted to read every word, searching for evidence that he actually missed me and not just the social connections I now had. Margaret noticed my distraction during one of our weekly dinners at her house. She'd made a habit of inviting me over on Thursdays, and I'd learned she was an excellent cook, despite having staff who could do it for her. "You keep checking your phone," she observed, "waiting for something?" A response from Claire Simmons, Dorothy's daughter. I sent her a letter 2 weeks ago. And? Nothing. Maybe Linda was right. Maybe some bridges are too burned to rebuild. Or maybe it takes time. Margaret passed me the salad bowl. "What about your son? Has he tried to contact you?" "Constantly. Texts, voicemails, emails. He even sent flowers to the foundation office." "Have you responded?" "No." I set down my fork. "Is that cruel? Am I punishing him?" "Are you?" Margaret asked. "Or are you establishing that you have value and relationships with you require effort? I don't know the difference anymore." "Then let me tell you a story," Margaret said, "about my son, the one in Monaco, the one who wanted to put me in a facility. She told me about Michael, her oldest, how he'd always been ambitious, always reaching for more, how he'd married a woman from old European money and slowly started seeing his American family as provincial, how he'd stopped visiting, stopped calling, only reached out when he needed something. The final break came when I had my stroke 3 years ago," Margaret said. "I was in the hospital for 2 weeks. Daniel was there every day. Michael sent a card. When I got home and needed help with physical therapy, with adjusting to life with limited mobility, Daniel rearranged his entire schedule. Michael suggested I hire someone. That must have hurt," I said. "It destroyed me. But here's what I learned. Some people are only capable of loving you when it's convenient. When you're healthy, independent, not requiring anything that interferes with their perfect lives. And when you establish boundaries with those people, when you say, 'I deserve better than this,' they have 2 choices. They can rise to meet your expectations, or they can walk away." Michael walked away. He did, and it still hurts 3 years later. I still think about him every day. I still hope that maybe someday he'll wake up and realize what he's lost. She looked at me directly. "But I don't chase him anymore. I don't beg for his time or attention. I don't pretend his crumbs of affection are enough to sustain me. Because I learned that I can miss someone and still recognize that having them in my life on their terms is worse than not having them at all." "How do you know the difference," I asked, "between setting boundaries and giving up?" "Boundaries leave the door open. Giving up locks it. What you're doing with Ryan, not responding immediately, making him sit with the consequences of his choices, that's a boundary. You're saying, 'I'm worth more than last-minute texts and guilt flowers.' You're not saying, 'I never want to hear from you again.' What if he stops trying? Then you'll know he was only trying because you suddenly had connections that could benefit him, and you'll have your answer about what you mean to him." The next morning, a thick envelope was waiting on my desk at work. Return address, Claire Simmons. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside was a 3-page letter, handwritten on nice stationery. I read it twice, my heart pounding. "Dear Mrs. Carter," it began. "I received your letter and I've read it approximately 15 times, trying to decide how to respond. I'll be honest. My first instinct was to throw it away. I've spent the last 5 years building a life that doesn't include my mother's constant judgment and guilt trips, and I wasn't interested in revisiting that pain. But something about your letter got through. Maybe it was the part about your own son. Maybe it was that you didn't try to convince me my mother is perfect or that I'm wrong to need distance. Maybe it was just that you seem to actually understand how complicated this is." She went on to explain her side. How Dorothy had been controlling, how every phone call had included subtle criticisms disguised as concern, how Dorothy had made Claire feel like she was never quite good enough, never quite making the right choices, how the wedding had been the breaking point because Dorothy couldn't respect Claire's boundaries even for one day. "But," the letter continued, "I also know my mother isn't a monster. She's just a woman who loves too hard and worries too much and doesn't know how to let go. And I know that cutting her out completely has been painful for both of us. So here's what I'm willing to do. I'll meet with her once, in a neutral location with a mediator present, not to promise reconciliation, just to talk, to maybe help both of us get some closure, or maybe find a way to have some kind of limited relationship that doesn't destroy me. But I need ground rules. I need her to hear my boundaries and actually respect them. Can you help with that?" I scheduled the meeting for 2 weeks out in one of the foundation's conference rooms. I worked with Dorothy on understanding Claire's perspective, on learning to listen without defending, on accepting that Claire's experience of their relationship was valid, even if it didn't match Dorothy's intentions. "This is so hard," Dorothy said during one of our prep sessions. Hearing that I hurt her when I was trying to help, that my love felt like control. "I know," I said, "but if you want any chance at a relationship with her, you have to start by validating her pain instead of explaining it away." The day of the meeting, I was more nervous than Dorothy seemed to be. Claire arrived exactly on time, a polished woman in her mid-30s with her mother's eyes and none of her softness. "Thank you for coming," I said. "I'm here for 90 minutes, Claire replied. That's what we agreed on, not a minute more. The first hour was rough. Dorothy cried. Claire was stone-faced. They talked past each other, old patterns reasserting themselves. I was about to call it a loss when something shifted. Dorothy said, "I just want to understand what I did that was so terrible. I was trying to be a good mother." And Claire, instead of her usual defensive anger, went quiet. When she spoke again, her voice was small. "You were a good mother. That's what makes this so hard. You weren't abusive. You didn't abandon me. You just loved me in a way that felt like drowning, and I couldn't make you understand that without completely cutting you off." "I'm listening now," Dorothy said. Tell me what drowning felt like." They talked for another hour past Claire's 90-minute limit. It wasn't a miracle reconciliation. Claire didn't suddenly forgive everything, and Dorothy didn't suddenly understand all her mistakes. But it was a start. They agreed to email once a month. No phone calls, no visits, just emails. A way to maintain connection without the overwhelming intimacy Dorothy wanted and Claire couldn't handle. "Thank you," Claire said to me on her way out. "I don't know if this will work long term, but at least now I feel like my mother heard me for the first time in my life." After she left, Dorothy sat in the conference room crying. But these were different tears. "She's willing to try," Dorothy said. "It's not what I wanted. I wanted my daughter back fully, wanted to be involved in her life the way I used to be. But it's something, it's more than I had yesterday." "Sometimes something is enough," I told her. I thought about that a lot over the next few weeks. Sometimes something is enough. Sometimes you don't get the full reconciliation, the tearful reunion, the happy ending. Sometimes you get emails once a month. Sometimes you get a relationship that's 10% of what you wanted, but 100% more than what you had. And sometimes that has to be enough. Ryan's text had slowed down, from multiple times a day to once a day to every few days. The messages had changed too. Less, "Mom, please call me," and more, "Hope you're doing well." Vanessa surprisingly had sent me a message, a long one, clearly drafted and redrafted, trying to thread the needle between apology and self-justification. She was sorry if she'd hurt me. She'd been stressed about the wedding. She hoped we could move forward, blah, blah, blah. I didn't respond to her either. 3 months into my new job, I got a call from Gregory Hartwick. "Mrs. Carter," he said, his voice careful, "I'm calling to apologize for what happened at my daughter's wedding. The way you were treated was unacceptable, and I've had several conversations with Vanessa about her behavior." "I appreciate that," I said, But I'm not the one you need to apologize to. Your daughter made her choices. I'm dealing with the consequences. That's between me and her and Ryan. I understand, but I also wanted to let you know that I've asked the Foundation's board to consider you for a board position. Margaret speaks very highly of your work, and I think your perspective would be valuable. There it was. The real reason for his call. Not genuine remorse, but damage control. Making sure I wasn't going to cause problems in his social circle, trying to smooth things over by offering me more status. Thank you, but no, I said. I'm happy doing the work I'm doing. I don't need a board seat. Are you sure? It comes with significant. I'm sure. I hung up before he could finish. Margaret laughed when I told her about it later. Gregory's panicking. He's realized that you're in his world now, whether he likes it or not, and he's trying to control the narrative. Let him panic, I said. I didn't take this job to make connections or climb any ladders. I took it because I needed to remember that I have value beyond being someone's embarrassing mother. And have you? Margaret asked. Remembered your value? I thought about Dorothy and Claire, sitting in that conference room, finally hearing each other. I thought about the other families I'd started working with, the slow, painful progress towards something that wasn't quite forgiveness, but was maybe understanding. I thought about waking up every morning with a purpose beyond waiting for Ryan to decide I was worth his time. Yeah, I said, I think I have. That night, I finally listened to Ryan's voicemails. There were 43 of them, spanning 3 months. I listened to them chronologically, hearing the progression from panic to frustration to something that might have been actual self-reflection. The last one from 2 days ago was different. Mom, Ryan's voice said, tired and small. I know you're not calling me back. I know I don't deserve for you to call me back. I need you to know that I'm sorry. Really sorry. Not because you have connections now or because I'm afraid of what people think, but because I stood there and let Vanessa call you worthless and I didn't defend you. I chose status over love, and I'm ashamed of that. Vanessa and I are in counseling. We're trying to work through a lot of stuff. She's not a bad person, Mom. She's just scared. Her whole life she's been valued for what she can offer, not who she is. And she's terrified of anything that threatens that value. That doesn't excuse what she did. I know that, but I'm trying to understand it so we can fix it. I'm also trying to understand why I was so quick to erase you from my life. Why I let my ambition matter more than the woman who sacrificed everything to raise me. I don't have good answers yet, but I'm working on it. And I really hope that someday you'll give me a chance to prove that I can be better than I was. I love you, Mom. I'm sorry it took losing you to remember how to say that. I played it 3 times, listening for sincerity, for manipulation, for any sign that this was just another attempt to manage me. And what I heard was my son finally starting to grow up. I didn't call him back that night, but I didn't delete the message either. Instead, I sent him a text, just 1 line. I heard your message. I'm glad you're in counseling. That's a good start. His response came within 30 seconds. Can we talk, please? I stared at those 3 words for a long time. Can we talk? Like it was that simple. Like 3 months of silence could be bridged with a phone call and some well-rehearsed apologies. Not yet, I typed back. I'm not ready. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Then, I understand. I'll wait. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd spent 6 months waiting for Ryan to acknowledge me, to make time for me, to decide I was worth squeezing into his schedule. Now he was waiting for me. And part of me, the petty hurt part, enjoyed making him wait. But another part of me, the part that still remembered rocking him to sleep when he had nightmares, wondered if I was being cruel, if I was using my newfound leverage to punish him instead of heal. You're overthinking it, Margaret said when I confessed my confusion during one of our Thursday dinners. You told him you're not ready. That's not punishment. That's honesty. But what if I'm never ready? What if I'm just using not ready as an excuse to keep him at arm's length forever? Then that's your choice to make. She passed me the wine bottle. Evelyn, you spent your entire adult life putting Ryan first, making sacrifices for him, centering your world around him, defining your worth by how well you mothered him. Is it really so terrible to put yourself first for once? To say, I need time, and actually take it. I poured wine I would have considered too expensive to drink 6 months ago. His voicemail sounded genuine, like he actually understands what he did wrong. Maybe he does. Or maybe he's just realized that losing you has social consequences he didn't anticipate. Margaret's voice was gentle but firm. The only way to know the difference is to make him prove it over time. Words are easy. Changed behavior is hard. The Foundation's annual gala was in 2 weeks. It was the biggest fundraising event of the year, and as the new Director of Family Services, I was expected to attend. Expected to give a speech, actually, about the work we were doing. The thought terrified me. I can't get up in front of 300 wealthy donors and talk about family estrangement, I told Daniel during a planning meeting. Half of them probably have their own estranged relatives. They're pretending don't exist. Exactly, Daniel said, which is why your speech will hit them where it hurts. Make it personal. Tell your story. Make them see themselves in it. I don't want to air my dirty laundry in public. You're not airing dirty laundry. You're demonstrating why this work matters. He leaned forward. Evelyn, do you know what most people think when they hear about family estrangement? They assume the parent must have done something terrible, must have been abusive or negligent or toxic. They don't think about people like you, loving parents who made normal human mistakes and got cut off anyway. They need to hear that story. I spent a week writing and rewriting that speech. Every draft felt either too self-pitying or too accusatory, too raw or too sanitized. I finally showed a version to Margaret. She read it in silence, her expression unreadable. When she finished, she looked up at me with wet eyes. This is perfect, she said. Don't change a word. The night of the gala, I stood backstage in a dress Margaret had helped me pick out. Elegant but not ostentatious. Expensive but not flashy. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold my note cards. You're going to be amazing, Daniel said, appearing beside me. Just speak from the heart. What if I cry? What if I freeze up? What if you stop catastrophizing and trust yourself? He squeezed my shoulder. You've helped a dozen families start healing in the past 3 months. You know this material. You know this pain. Just share it. The MC called my name. I walked onto the stage and the lights were so bright I couldn't see the audience, which was probably good because if I'd seen 300 faces staring at me, I might have run. My name is Evelyn Carter, I began, and my voice was steadier than I expected. 6 months ago, I went to my son's wedding. I'd saved for half a year to afford a dress and a gift. I took 3 buses to get there, and when I arrived, his new wife told me I wasn't welcome, that I would ruin the aesthetic, that I was an embarrassment. The room went silent. My son stood there and let her say it, and then, when I came back anyway, because I couldn't accept that he'd really choose a champagne fountain over his own mother, he looked at me and said the words that broke something fundamental inside me. You don't fit, Mom. You never did. I told him everything. The humiliation, the pain, the crushing realization that the child I'd sacrificed everything for was ashamed of me. I told them about helping Margaret up the hill, about the helicopter arrival, about the job offer that had saved me from drowning in my own worthlessness. But here's what I learned, I said, and my voice cracked. I learned that loving someone doesn't mean accepting whatever crumbs of affection they're willing to give you. It doesn't mean making yourself smaller and quieter and more convenient until you practically disappear. It doesn't mean waiting forever for them to decide you're worth their time. I looked out into the audience, and my eyes had adjusted enough to see faces now. I saw people crying, saw people holding hands, saw recognition in their expressions. The families we work with at the foundation, they're not all innocent victims. Some of them made real mistakes. Some of them were controlling or critical or difficult, but most of them were just people who loved imperfectly and got erased for it. And what we're trying to do isn't force reconciliation. We're trying to help people understand that they have value, whether or not their children acknowledge it, that their worth isn't determined by someone else's shame. I paused. Gathering courage for the last part. My son has been trying to contact me for 3 months, calling, texting, apologizing. And I haven't responded because I'm not ready yet. Maybe I will be someday. Maybe we'll find a way to have some kind of relationship that respects both of our boundaries, or maybe we won't. But either way, I'm going to be okay because I finally understand that I'm worth more than I was willing to settle for. The applause started before I finished my last sentence. It built and built until it was overwhelming. People standing, some of them openly weeping. I walked off stage in a daze, and Margaret was there to catch me. "You did it," she whispered. "You beautiful, brave woman, you did it." The donations that night exceeded our goal by $2 million. $2 million. People kept approaching me throughout the evening, sharing their own stories of estrangement, of children who'd disappeared, of parents they'd cut off and now regretted losing. One woman, dripping in diamonds that could have paid my rent for 5 years, grabbed my hands and said, "I haven't spoken to my mother in 8 years. After hearing you, I'm calling her tomorrow." Another man, a CEO, whose company name I recognized from Forbes' list, told me quietly, "My father died last month. We hadn't talked in a decade. I'll never get to fix that now. Don't let your son wait too long." Their stories swirled around me, each one a variation on the same theme. Love and shame and pride and regret all tangled together in impossible knots. I was exhausted by the time I got home, but I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about that man whose father had died, about permanent endings and lost chances and doors that close forever when you're not paying attention. At 2 a.m., I picked up my phone and called Ryan. He answered on the first ring, his voice thick with sleep and surprise. "Mom?" "Hi, baby." The endearment slipped out before I could stop it. Years of habit overriding months of hurt. "Are you okay? It's 2 in the morning." "I'm okay. I gave a speech tonight at the foundation gala about us, about what happened." Silence. Then, "What did you say?" "The truth, that you were ashamed of me, that your wife called me an embarrassment, that I've spent 3 months learning to value myself instead of waiting for you to decide I'm worth your time." "Mom, let me finish. I also said that maybe someday we'll find our way back to each other. And I've been thinking about that, about whether I actually believe it or if I was just telling a story with a hopeful ending because people wanted to hear one." "What did you decide?" His voice was so small, so scared. My baby boy, terrified that his mother was about to tell him goodbye forever. "I decided that I want to try, but on my terms, with boundaries, with the understanding that you don't get to treat me like garbage when it's convenient and like family when you need something. I know I don't deserve. This isn't about what you deserve, Ryan. This is about what I need. And what I need is to know that you understand why what you did was so devastating. Not just understand intellectually like you read it in a therapy workbook, but actually feel it." "I do feel it." His voice broke. "Mom, I can't sleep. I can't eat. Every time I see Vanessa's family, all I can think about is you sitting on that bench outside the plaza crying. Every time someone congratulates me on the wedding, I want to tell them I destroyed my relationship with my mother to pay for it. I hate myself for what I did to you." "Don't hate yourself. That's useless." I was surprised by how calm I sounded. "Just be better. Actually change. Not because I have connections now that could help your career, but because you genuinely understand that I have value beyond what I can offer you." "I do understand that. I swear I do." "Then prove it. Not with flowers or expensive gifts or grand gestures. Prove it by showing up consistently, by respecting my boundaries, by understanding that if we rebuild this relationship, it's going to look different than it did before." "Different how?" "I don't know yet. That's what we'll figure out together." I took a breath. "Do you want to have coffee?" "Next week sometime." Yes, absolutely. When? Where? I can come to you. Wednesday, 10 a.m. There's a coffee shop near the foundation office. Brew and Bean. Do you know it? I'll find it. Mom, thank you. Thank you for giving me another chance. I'm not giving you anything yet, I said. We're having coffee, that's all. Don't make it bigger than it is. After we hung up, I sat in the dark for a long time, wondering if I'd just made a terrible mistake. If I was setting myself up for more hurt, more disappointment, more evidence that Ryan would never really value me the way I needed to be valued. But I'd also meant what I said in my speech. I was going to be okay either way. And that knowledge, that fundamental certainty that my worth didn't depend on Ryan's approval, made it possible to take the risk. The days leading up to Wednesday were strange. I caught myself rehearsing conversations, planning what I'd say, how I'd respond to his apologies or his excuses or his explanations. Then I'd stop myself, recognizing the old pattern of trying to manage his emotions, trying to make things easier for him. Tuesday night, Vanessa called. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. Mrs. Carter, she said, and her voice was different, smaller, less certain. I know you're meeting with Ryan tomorrow. I wanted to talk to you first. Why? Because I owe you an apology, a real one, not the bullshit email I sent 3 months ago. The profanity surprised me, Vanessa's perfect veneer cracking. I'm listening, I said. What I did to you at the wedding was cruel. I've spent my whole life being told that appearance is everything, that the right image matters more than anything else, and I convinced myself that you didn't fit the image we needed, that your presence would somehow diminish us. She paused. But the truth is, I was jealous. Jealous of what? Of the fact that Ryan loved you so much it scared him, that he'd spent his whole life trying to make you proud, trying to live up to what you'd sacrifice for him. I wanted him to love me like that, to see me as essential instead of ornamental, and I thought if I could make him choose me over you, it would prove that I'd won. I didn't know what to say. It was the most honest thing Vanessa had ever said to me. That's messed up, I finally said. I know. My therapist has a lot to say about my need for validation through competition. We're working on it. She sighed. I don't expect you to forgive me. I just wanted you to know that I understand now that what I did wasn't just rude. It was cruel and you didn't deserve it. No, I didn't. Ryan loves you, really loves you. He's been miserable since the wedding, and I know I'm the reason for a lot of that misery. Her voice got quieter. I'm trying to be better, to be the kind of person who builds people up instead of tearing them down to feel powerful. But it's hard when you've spent 28 years learning the opposite. That's not an excuse, I said. I know I'm not offering excuses. I'm offering explanation and apology and a genuine hope that maybe someday you won't hate me. I don't hate you, Vanessa. I hate what you did. There's a difference. Is there room for both of those things to be true? To hate what I did, but maybe eventually not hate me? I thought about all the families I'd worked with over the past few months, all the complicated relationships that couldn't be neatly categorized as good or bad, healthy or toxic, all the people trying to find middle ground between total estrangement and unconditional acceptance. Maybe, I said, we'll see. Wednesday morning, I arrived at Brew and Bean 15 minutes early, ordered a coffee black and sat by the window where I could watch for Ryan. He showed up 10 minutes early too. I watched him through the glass, saw him check his reflection in the shop window, saw him take several deep breaths before coming inside. He looked thinner, tired. His expensive suit couldn't hide the fact that he hadn't been sleeping well. Hi, Mom. He stood at the table awkwardly, like he didn't know if he was allowed to hug me. Sit, I said. He sat. For a long moment, we just looked at each other. My son, my baby, the boy I'd raised alone, the man who'd broken my heart. I don't know where to start, he finally said. How about with the truth? Not what you think I want to hear. The actual truth about why you did what you did. He stared into his coffee cup like it held answers. I was ashamed. Not of you exactly, of where I came from, of being the kid whose mom worked at a diner, the kid who got free lunch at school, the kid who wore hand-me-downs and lived in a crappy apartment and couldn't afford the class trip to Washington. None of that was your fault. I know, but it still defined me. And when I got to college, when I started meeting people who'd never had to worry about money, who thought poverty was something that happened to other people in other places, I wanted to be one of them so badly I could taste it. So you erased me. Not at first. At first I just didn't talk about you much. Didn't invite you to campus events. Didn't introduce you to my friends. Small erasures. He looked up at me and his eyes were red. And then those small erasures became normal. Became easier than explaining. And by the time I met Vanessa, by the time I was working at her father's company and moving in their circles, you were already half erased. It felt like finishing what I'd started. The honesty hurt worse than lies would have. Did you ever think about what that did to me? I asked, watching you pull away, wondering what I'd done wrong, trying to be less needy, less visible, less of whatever it was about me that embarrassed you. Every single day I thought about it, but I convinced myself it was temporary. That once I was really established, once I was secure in my new life, I could bring you back in and no one would question it. That's not how it works, Ryan. You don't get to put people in storage until they're convenient. I know that now. Do you? Or do you just know it because I ended up with connections you need? Because let's be honest, if Margaret Langford hadn't offered me a job, if I was still living above the dry cleaner and working at the diner, would you be here right now? The question hung between us, sharp and dangerous. I don't know, Ryan said finally. And that's the most honest answer I can give you. I want to say yes. I want to believe I would have woken up eventually, realized how badly I'd screwed up, come crawling back to apologize. But I don't know if that's true or if I'm rewriting history to make myself feel better. The admission shocked me. I'd expected him to insist that yes, of course, he would have come to his senses regardless. Instead, he was giving me uncertainty, honesty that made him look worse, not better. The fact that you can admit that means something, I said quietly. Does it? Because from where I'm sitting, it just makes me look like an opportunistic asshole. You are an opportunistic asshole, but you're also my son. And those two things are going to have to coexist if we're going to fix this. He laughed, wet and choked. I've missed you so much. I've missed you too, but missing each other isn't enough to fix this. We need ground rules. Whatever you want, anything. Stop. Don't do that. Don't agree to anything I want without thinking about it. That's how we got here in the first place. You saying whatever you thought would make things easier without actually meaning it. He nodded slowly. Okay, what are your ground rules? We see each other when we both have time, not just when you can squeeze me in. We have honest conversations, even when they're uncomfortable. You don't make promises you can't keep. And most importantly, if you're ashamed of me, if you don't want me around your friends or Vanessa's family or wherever, you tell me directly instead of making excuses. I'm not ashamed of you anymore. That's easy to say now, but what happens at the next society event when someone asks about your family and you have to explain that your mother used to be a waitress? What happens when Vanessa's friends want to know where I summer or what charity boards I'm on? I tell them the truth, that my mother raised me alone after my father died, that she worked her ass off to give me opportunities she never had, that she's now the director of family services at the Langford Foundation, and she's doing incredible work helping people. And if they judge you for it, then fuck them. He said it with such vehemence that I almost believed him. Mom, I spent 6 months learning to be ashamed of you. I can spend the rest of my life learning to be proud of you again. We talked for 2 hours. He told me about counseling, about realizing how much of his self-worth was tied up in external validation, about how Vanessa's family operated, how every relationship was transactional, how love was something you earned through achievement rather than something freely given. That's why she was so threatened by you, he said. You represented unconditional love, the kind that doesn't go away when you fail or disappoint. She's never experienced that and it scared her. She called me yesterday, I said, to apologize. Ryan's eyebrows shot up. She did? She didn't tell me. I'm telling you now, and I'm telling you that I don't hate her. I hate what she did, but I understand why she did it. That doesn't make it okay, but it makes it human. Are you saying you forgive her? I'm saying I'm open to the possibility of not actively disliking her forever. That's not the same as forgiveness. That's going to take time. We talked about next steps. Coffee once a week, same time, same place. No big events yet, no family dinners or holidays, nothing with pressure. Just consistent, low-stakes contact where we could rebuild trust slowly. What about Vanessa, he asked. Do you want her there? Not yet. This is about you and me first. Once we figure out how to be mother and son again, we can work on how I fit into your marriage. As we were leaving, Ryan hesitated. Can I hug you? I considered saying no, making him wait longer, proving that he couldn't just apologize his way back into physical affection. But I was tired of proving points, tired of protecting myself from someone I'd once held against my chest and promised to love forever. Yeah, I said, you can hug me. He pulled me close, and he was taller than me now, broader, but he was also still my little boy. The one who used to cry when I left for work, the one who used to make me birthday cards with stick figure drawings of the two of us holding hands. I love you, Mom, he whispered into my hair. I'm so sorry. I love you too, I said, and we're going to figure this out, but it's going to take time. I have time, he said. I have all the time you need. I pulled back and looked at him. Good, because I need a lot of it. Walking back to the foundation office, I felt lighter. Not healed. Healing would take months, maybe years, but lighter, like I'd been carrying a weight I didn't know I could set down. My phone rang. Margaret. How did it go? She asked without preamble. Better than I expected, worse than I hoped, somewhere in the middle. That sounds about right for real life. Dinner tonight, I made lasagna. You always make lasagna when you think I need comfort food, because you always need comfort food. See you at 7. That night, sitting at Margaret's table, I told her everything. The conversation, the boundaries, the hug, the uncertain hope that maybe Ryan and I could find our way back to each other. I'm proud of you, Margaret said. It would have been easier to either cut him off completely or forgive him immediately. You're doing the hard thing, holding him accountable while leaving room for growth. It doesn't feel hard, it feels necessary. The hard things usually do. Daniel joined us for dessert, and we talked about the foundation, about the families we were helping, about the success stories and the heartbreaks. We got another donation today, Daniel said, anonymous, $500,000. The note said it was inspired by your speech at the gala, $500,000, because I'd stood on a stage and told the truth about being humiliated by my own son. People are hungry for honesty, Margaret said. They're tired of pretending their families are perfect, tired of hiding their pain because it doesn't fit the image they're supposed to project. That's what Vanessa said, I told them, that she'd spent her whole life being told appearance matters more than anything else. Gregory and Patricia raised her that way, Margaret said. Everything is image. Everything is transaction. It's no wonder she turned out cruel. She's trying to change, I said, surprising myself by defending her. She's in therapy. She's trying to understand why she needs to tear people down to feel powerful. That's good. Change is possible even for people like Vanessa, but you'll have to prove it over time, just like Ryan. Just like Ryan, who I was meeting for coffee again next Wednesday, and the Wednesday after that. Small steps, building something new from the broken pieces of what we used to have. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. It wasn't even an ending at all, really. Just a beginning. A tentative, uncertain, fragile beginning where I wasn't sure if we'd make it but was willing to try anyway. And somehow that felt like enough. 6 months of Wednesday coffee meetings taught me something crucial about forgiveness. It's not a single moment of grace where you decide to let go of all the hurt. It's 1,000 small choices made over and over to keep showing up even when it would be easier to walk away. Some weeks were good. Ryan would show up with stories about work that didn't revolve around status or appearances. He'd ask about my cases at the foundation with genuine interest, not just polite obligation. Those weeks, I could see the boy I'd raised, curious, compassionate, thoughtful. Other weeks were harder. He'd slip back into old patterns, dropping names of important people he'd had lunch with, talking about Vanessa's family connections like they were achievements he'd earned. Those weeks, I had to remind myself that change doesn't happen in a straight line, that backsliding is part of the process. The real test came in November, 6 months after that first coffee meeting. Ryan called me on a Tuesday, which was already unusual. We'd kept strictly to our Wednesday schedule. "Mom, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me about whether you're ready." My stomach clenched. "Okay." "Thanksgiving. At our place. Just you, me, and Vanessa. No extended family, no pressure, just dinner." He paused. "But if you're not ready, if it's too soon, I'll understand. We can keep doing our Wednesday coffees and wait until you are ready." I thought about it. 6 months ago, the idea of sitting at a table with Vanessa would have made me physically ill. Now, after months of small steps and honest conversations, it felt possible. Terrifying, but possible. "What does Vanessa think about this, Anhas?" I asked. It was her idea, actually. She's been in therapy too, working through a lot of stuff about her family and how she treats people. She wants to try to make things right, but again, only if you're ready. I'll think about it. That's all I'm asking. I talked to Margaret about it that Thursday over lasagna. She'd made it a tradition, every Thursday, dinner at her place, just the two of us, unless Daniel was in town. It had become the anchor point of my week, the place where I could be completely honest without worrying about managing anyone's feelings. "What's your gut telling you?" Margaret asked. "That I'm scared, that it could go terribly wrong, that Vanessa could slip back into her old behavior, and I'd be sitting there at their fancy table feeling exactly like I did at the wedding." I pushed food around my plate, but also that if I don't try, I'll never know if we can actually move forward. Those are both true. The question is which truth matters more to you right now. I went to Thanksgiving dinner. Ryan and Vanessa's apartment was in one of those buildings where doormen wear white gloves and the elevator has a chandelier. Everything was tasteful, expensive, carefully curated, the kind of place that would have made me feel inadequate 6 months ago. But I'd spent 6 months learning my own worth, 6 months helping families rebuild, 6 months understanding that my value had nothing to do with thread count or zip codes or whether I knew which fork to use for salad. So I walked into that apartment wearing a dress I'd bought with my own money from my foundation salary, carrying a pie I'd made myself because I wasn't going to show up empty-handed, and I held my head high. Vanessa answered the door. She looked nervous, which was the first time I'd ever seen her look anything other than perfectly composed. "Mrs. Carter, thank you for coming. I know this isn't easy." "Call me Evelyn," I said. "Mrs. Carter makes me feel like you're talking to your husband's mother instead of trying to build a relationship with me." Something shifted in her face. Relief, maybe. "Evelyn, okay, come in. Can I take your coat?" The dinner was awkward at first. We were all trying too hard, being too polite, tiptoeing around the elephant in the room. Finally, halfway through the turkey, I couldn't take it anymore. "Can we talk about the wedding?" I said, "because we're all thinking about it, and pretending we're not is exhausting." Ryan and Vanessa exchanged a look. "What do you want to know?" Vanessa asked carefully. "I want to know if you actually regret what you did, or if you just regret that it had consequences." The bluntness of the question hung in the air. Ryan started to say something, but Vanessa held up a hand. "That's fair. And the honest answer is both." She set down her fork, met my eyes. "When I told you to leave, I genuinely believed I was doing the right thing. Protecting our image, protecting Ryan's career, protecting the life we were building. I didn't regret it at the time. I felt justified. And now? Now I understand that I was protecting myself from feeling inadequate by making you the problem. You represented everything I was taught to look down on. Modest means unfashionable clothes, lack of social polish. And if I could exclude you, if I could convince Ryan that you didn't belong, it meant I was successfully climbing the ladder my parents had been grooming me to climb my entire life. My speech this year was shorter, more focused. Last year I told you about being excluded from my son's wedding, I said to a room full of donors. About learning to value myself when the person I loved most was ashamed of me. Some of you came up to me afterward and said you'd reconcile with your estranged parents or children. I want to know how many of you actually did it. I waited. Slowly hands went up around the room, maybe 30 out of 300 people. That's 10%, better than nothing, but not great odds. Now let me ask another question. How many of you tried to reconcile and it didn't work out? More hands, another 20 or so. And how many of you realize that some relationships aren't meant to be reconciled? That sometimes the healthiest choice is to accept the estrangement and build a life without that person in it. The rest of the hands went up slowly, hesitantly. That's what we don't talk about enough. We focus so much on the happy reunions, on the tearful forgiveness scenes, that we forget. Sometimes people don't change. Sometimes the damage is too deep. Sometimes the best outcome isn't reconciliation, it's acceptance. I paused, looking out at all those faces. My son and I are rebuilding our relationship. But it's not the relationship we had before, and it never will be. We've both changed too much for that. What we're building is something new. Something that acknowledges the hurt instead of pretending it never happened. And some days that feels like success. Other days it feels like settling. But it's real and it's honest and it's ours. The donations that night were even higher than the year before. But more importantly, people started asking different questions. Not, how do I get my child to forgive me? But how do I accept that my child might never forgive me and still have a meaningful life? That shift in conversation felt more valuable than any amount of money. 18 months after the wedding, Vanessa invited me to lunch. Just the two of us at a restaurant she picked. Not too fancy, not too casual, somewhere neutral. I want to show you something, she said, pulling out her phone. She showed me a text exchange with her mother. Her mother had written something cruel about one of Vanessa's friends, someone who'd lost their job and was struggling financially. Vanessa's response was simple. That's unkind and I won't participate in it. If you can't speak about people with basic respect, I'd prefer you not speak about them to me at all. How did she respond? I asked. She called me ungrateful and dramatic, told me I was betraying my raising, then didn't speak to me for 2 weeks. Vanessa smiled, and there was pain in it, but also pride. And I didn't apologize. I didn't back down. I just let her be angry. How does it feel? Like I'm finally becoming someone I can respect. It's terrifying and lonely sometimes, but it's also free. Ryan's lucky to have you, I said, not because of your family's money or connections, but because you're willing to do the hard work of becoming better. He's lucky to have you too, his actual mother, not the sanitized version he was trying to pretend he had. We'd come so far, this woman who'd called me an embarrassment and me. We'd never be close friends, we'd never be like mother and daughter. But we'd built something real on the ruins of that terrible first meeting. And that counted for something. Margaret passed away in the spring, peacefully, in her sleep, exactly the way she'd wanted to go. Daniel called me at 6 a.m., his voice broken. She loved you, he said. She told me last week that meeting you was one of the best things that happened in her final years. That helping you reminded her why the foundation mattered. The funeral was enormous. Hundreds of people whose lives Margaret had touched. But afterward, at the private family gathering, it was just Daniel, his wife, me, and a handful of Margaret's closest friends. She left you something, Daniel said, handing me an envelope. Inside was a letter in Margaret's handwriting, shaky but still legible. Dear Evelyn, it read, if you're reading this, I'm gone. Don't be sad for too long. I had a good run and I'm ready for whatever comes next. I wanted you to know that you changed my life, not because you pushed my wheelchair up a hill, though that's where it started, but because you reminded me that kindness still exists in a world that often feels cruel. You reminded me that people can change, can grow, can choose to be better than they were raised to be. I see you doing that work every day at the foundation, and I'm so proud of what you've built. Keep going. Keep helping people find their way back to each other or find peace in walking away. Both are equally valuable. You are more valuable than you know. Don't ever forget that. With love and gratitude, Margaret. I cried reading it. Cried for the loss of this woman who'd saved me when I was at my lowest. Cried for all the Thursday dinners we'd never have again. Cried because she'd believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. Daniel found me on the back porch trying to pull myself together. She wanted you to have her position on the foundation board, he said, if you're willing. Daniel, I'm not qualified. You're exactly qualified. You understand the work in a way most board members never will. You've lived it. He sat down next to me. Besides, she made it a condition of a very large bequest. The foundation gets another 20 million if we appoint you to the board. So really, you'd be doing us a favor. I laughed through my tears. That's very Margaret, manipulating things from beyond the grave. She preferred to think of it as strategic planning. I took the board position, spent the next year learning nonprofit governance, fundraising strategy, all the administrative stuff that didn't come naturally to me. But I also brought something the other board members didn't have: direct understanding of the people we were helping. When debates came up about program funding or policy changes, I could say, I worked with a woman who, and the room would go quiet, because I wasn't talking about statistics or case studies. I was talking about Dorothy, about Claire, about the dozens of families I'd walked alongside. Ryan and Vanessa came to the board installation ceremony. Watching them in the audience, holding hands, both of them genuinely proud of me, felt surreal. 2 years ago, Ryan had been ashamed to have me at his wedding. Now he was bringing Vanessa to watch me be sworn onto a foundation board. You look happy, Mom, he said afterward. I am happy, happier than I've been in years, maybe ever. I'm sorry I almost cost you this, that I made you feel like you had to shrink yourself to fit into my life. You did cost me that for a while, but then I found it again on my own terms, and that made it mean more. I love you, Mom. I love you too, baby. Even when I didn't like you very much, I still loved you. That's the thing about being a parent. The love doesn't go away just because the person disappoints you. It just hurts more. Vanessa hugged me before they left. A real hug, not the awkward social obligation kind. Thank you, she whispered. For what? Over the next 2 years, I watched Ryan and Vanessa parent Emma with intentionality I'd never seen before. They had hard conversations about how to raise a child with wealth and privilege without raising her to be cruel. They brought her to the foundation sometimes. Let her see me working with families in crisis. Made sure she understood that not everyone lived the way she did. I don't want her to be like I was, Vanessa said one day, watching Emma play with blocks in my office. I don't want her to learn that people's value is determined by their bank accounts or their social connections. But I also don't know how to raise her without those messages when they're everywhere in our world. You do exactly what you're doing. You expose her to different perspectives. You model treating everyone with respect. You talk to her about what matters and what doesn't. And when she inevitably absorbs some toxic messages anyway, because she will, you correct them with love instead of shame. Did you do that with Ryan? I tried. Obviously didn't succeed completely, since he still ended up being ashamed of me for a while. But the foundation was there, the values were there. That's why he was able to come back to them eventually. Dorothy Simmons came to Emma's second birthday party. It was a small gathering, just family and close friends, and Ryan had asked if I wanted to invite any of my people. Dorothy's family, I'd said. Claire came too with her husband. She and Dorothy had graduated from monthly emails to occasional phone calls, from phone calls to having coffee twice a year. It wasn't the relationship Dorothy had dreamed of, but it was real. It was something. Watching Claire and Dorothy interact with careful warmth, maintaining boundaries but clearly caring about each other, I thought about how far we'd all come, how much we'd all learned about holding love and limits at the same time. Ryan pulled me aside at one point. Thank you for not giving up on me, he said. I know I keep saying that, but I need you to know I mean it. Every time I look at Emma, every time I think about the kind of parent I want to be, I think about you, about everything you sacrificed, about how badly I failed to appreciate it, and I'm determined to do better. You are doing better. You're not perfect, nobody is, but you're trying. You're showing up. You're doing the work. That's all any of us can do. I want Emma to know her grandmother, the real you, not some sanitized version. I want her to hear about you working at the diner, about you struggling to make ends meet, about you pushing a stranger's wheelchair up a hill when your own heart was breaking. I want her to understand that those are the things that make you remarkable, not the board position or the foundation work or the connections. Those things all came from the same place, I said. From learning that my worth wasn't dependent on other people's recognition, that I could be valuable even when people treated me as disposable. That's exactly what I wanted to learn. Standing in Ryan and Vanessa's home, watching their daughter play with the other children, surrounded by people who'd learned to choose growth over comfort, I realized something. I'd gotten my happy ending after all, not the one I'd imagined, not the fairy tale reunion where Ryan apologized and everything went back to how it used to be. This was better. This was real. I'd learned to value myself. I'd built a career helping other people find their worth. I'd watched my son and his wife do the painful work of becoming better humans. I'd gained a granddaughter who would grow up knowing that love came with boundaries, that kindness mattered more than status, that people's value had nothing to do with their ability to benefit you. And I'd learned the most important lesson of all, that you can love someone desperately and still refuse to accept less than you deserve. That setting boundaries isn't cruel, it's necessary. That sometimes the most loving thing you can do is step back and let someone live with the consequences of their choices. Ryan had made terrible choices. Vanessa had been genuinely cruel. But they'd also both done the work to change. And I'd done the work to heal while holding them accountable. That was the real story, not betrayal followed by miraculous reconciliation, but betrayal followed by boundary setting, followed by slow growth, followed by careful rebuilding, messy and imperfect and uncertain and real. Emma toddled over to me holding up a book. Gamma read? Of course, sweetheart. Grandma will always read to you. I picked her up, settled into a chair, and opened the book. And as I read to my granddaughter, surrounded by the family I'd lost and found again, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. Not because everything was perfect, but because I'd learned that I didn't need perfect. I just needed real and honest and built on mutual respect. And that finally was exactly what I had.